Everybody's playing craps, guns are on the table, and I remember collecting the rent, and as I was leaving, the person confronted me and said, "You don't need to be leaving with that money, we're going to keep it."
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
Hello and welcome to episode 76. I've been looking forward to today's conversation for a long time. You might remember Marty Green, my guest today, from episode 52, where we discussed several apartment deals that we've partnered on together. Well, Marty is also the owner of Green Property Management, and he has a very interesting story to tell about himself and the ups and downs he's been through in the real estate business. And I know that his experience and stories will be both enlightening and educational for our listeners. Marty, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
The last time you were here, we talked about the larger apartment deals that we've partnered on together and syndicated. And that was kind of our opportunity to talk about the deals we've done together. Today is your opportunity to talk about yourself and kind of give us a little background, where you come from and what your real estate experience was growing up.
Well, my father always had income properties in the St. John's area and Lansing area. We got to see how things were done in a ma and pa way.
What kind of properties did he own?
He had a lot of single family, 2 families, 4 families, and probably, I think he had an 11 unit maybe at one time. Also, I think he partnered with some larger buildings along the way. We were really the kids that were taken over to help clean up messes, and my mom would do a lot of the painting and wallpapering and a lot of wallpaper back then, and collect the rent.
So is that how you would spend your weekends?
I would spend
work on your dad's properties?
We would spend just about every waking hour working on working, whether it was on apartments or just working in general. I was really observant of how people would treat my parents. You'd have a few people that were wonderful people, but really what impressed upon me was how a lot of tenants would, what we'll call, use the system and take advantage of the ma and pa operation, not pay rent, ruin places, and it certainly was not any kind of profession I would ever want to get into. So
yeah, who would want to get into the property management business?
Yeah, I mean, I saw my parents work so hard, and you just kept scratching your head and you kept thinking, for what? And so I remember as a teenager, I thought to myself, this just does not seem like anything I would ever want to do. I mean, I'd have to be incredibly desperate to ever want to get into this industry.
But yet, here you are today. Not only in this industry, but you have a very successful property management company here in West Michigan, and we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
But so your experience growing up, your dad made you do all the work on the apartments. Mm-hmm. You saw the worst side of it.
Yes, yeah. He worked along with us. He had a person that would help off and on. Again, as kids, we didn't get the skilled labor part of things, the clean stuff. It was more cleaning out, garages that were literally from the floor to the ceiling with dirty diapers and different things that some tenants would just leave behind as gifts for them.
So you had the hazmat suits.
Yeah, well, we didn't have the hazmat suits. That's why I look the way I do today.
You had the experience growing up of working on your dad's properties, and you said, "I'm never going to do this."
No, never.
But then you did get back into real estate at some point. Jump ahead to when that bug kind of took hold of you.
That was sort of by accident. My wife and I, we got married very young. We had both just had turned 20. You just feel like you can conquer the world, and we were plugging along. I would have different jobs, mostly sales jobs, and I did very well in that arena. A couple of years into our marriage, we started to feel like it'd be nice to make some extra money. So we decided to buy a house that was actually a relative owned. I believe it was for about $27,000 and put in about $5,000 and ended up selling it for close to 60, and which was a lot of money for us. And it sort of made me rethink the idea of maybe there could be money in real estate. If I didn't have to deal with people or tenants, there might be opportunity to buy homes and fix them up. My wife and I started to buy homes that needed work. We would live in them at first, and that was the only way we could afford to do it. We would buy a single-family home, or one time we bought a two-family, and fix it up and resold it for a profit. We started to do more and more of that, and then along the way, I fell into the trap, I guess, of seeing some income properties that maybe we could buy. And the first one was someone who was selling a 4-unit. I wasn't sure how I was going to be able to do it. He needed a down payment of like $4,000. He was willing to hold a land contract.
So you weren't sure how you were going to be able to do it from the money perspective?
The money perspective. How was I going to come up with the money? I had no idea. So I added up the rents. I'm thinking, well, it's a 4-unit. I'm going to get their. It was first and last month's rent plus a deposit. The deposit I couldn't touch, but I thought, well, if I close on the right day, I'll get the first month's rent. He'll be giving me the last month's rent, and I had to come up with $4,000. So I put it on a credit card. And so I bought my first 4-family on a credit card. Well, this wasn't in the most desirable areas. So memories started to come back very quickly on what it was like to deal with tenants that weren't necessarily on your side, but in front of you made it look like they were your best friend. We took this property. We did fix it up a bit, as much as you could. Had some experiences along the way where I remember collecting rent and walking in, and everybody's playing craps and guns are on the table, and I remember collecting the rent, and as I was leaving, the person, not the person that lived there, but a friend, confronted me and said, "You don't need to be leaving with that money. We're gonna keep it." I was young and a little more feeling like Superman at the time, and would have none of that. So there was a little confrontation, of which someone did get hurt. I actually was sort of a bloody mess myself, but I did get away, and I walked away, and
with the money,
and with someone on the floor that wasn't in very good shape. And I had cuts as well. So it was one of those things that I'm looking back was very foolish of me to do. And in some sense, growing up, you collected rent differently than you do today. And I just
by beating up.
Well, I wasn't necessarily beating anybody up. I was just trying to get away with my money, with my rent.
Right.
And
did the fact that there were guns on the table
that made me a little
pause?
nervous? But where it happened, we were away from that area.
Oh, okay.
Instinctively, I might have had a little bit of a temper back then, and which I've tried to work through. But I got out. I got my rent. And this all happened so fast. I remember my younger brother, he was in the car waiting for me. And I come out, and I hop in, and I said, "Let's go." And he's like, "Okay." I get a little faster. Let's just get out of here quick. And then he looks at me, and he sees I had this white shirt on, and I had like blood all over it. He's like, "Okay, what happened?" I said, "I think I'm going to go to jail." I said, "I don't know what just happened, but it's not good."
Wow.
But nothing ever really became of that, other than the next time I went over there, the tenant, apologized all over the place and said, "I'm so sorry, that person's never welcome here again. That shouldn't have happened. And, by the way, he should be fine." I didn't ask any questions after that.
Wow.
It was, so there was that kind of an experience. I've had people that have owed rent where you knock on the door. I'm not sure how much I should totally share here, but you knew it was going to be a rough collection. Sometimes I'd ride over on my motorcycle and I'd just leave my helmet on, and I'd have this billy club that I had actually, and I'd knock on the door with it. And they'd just been rough tenants. They would give you a hard time, and people come to the door with very little on, thinking that that's going to pay the rent. And I'd have nothing to do with that. It was just like, that doesn't pay the bills. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And you wouldn't want to do it anyway with the people that came to the
door. You want your money, and that's it.
That's exactly right.
So would you classify these as D type properties?
Oh, these were
properties in D neighborhoods.
These might have been
worse than
they might have been worse than that. But it was the only way I could get back in or get into that industry, really. I was young. I could do some of the work myself. A lot of it, I'd learn along the way, pick up what I learned growing up. The risk reward at the time seemed worth it.
Because were you able to turn that 4-unit?
Yeah, I turned it. We made a profit. I want to say we probably made about a $20,000 profit in, a year and a half to 2 years.
So you sold it in a couple years.
Yeah. And then bought more. So we continued to buy more, and then we started to, we were flipping homes. My wife and I were now not living in them, but just buying homes and turning them. Maybe have a couple of kids in the picture here, and we'd clean the bedroom really well and the bathroom. Those would be the first two things that we would do, and we'd set up an area for them to play, and we'd just go in and we'd work just about around the clock. And when we were tired, we laid down and slept and got back up and started working, and we would try to get these places done as quickly as possible and get it back on the market. And we did that for years. It's the same.
So you were still buying the place, living in it.
No, we had another place that we had, but we pretty much camped out there while we were on the project, so that we could go home and get out of the atmosphere when we needed to. But while we were deep into it, if you started working on something and you just didn't want to stop, we were set up to keep going. And they usually were close by.
Were you now graduating to nicer single families, or were these still D properties and D neighborhoods?
Yeah, the single families were always not too bad. It was more the income properties that were the harder places that we had bought. So we were doing both at the same time. And then also I was working, Ruth was working, and I was working full time as well. And then we got to a point where I was making more money flipping homes and having income properties than sales. And I thought, I need to make a choice what I'm going to do. So I did.
And sales was your full-time job?
Yeah, I did a lot of different sales for companies around the area. And I also was hired as a consultant for business growth and development. But then I just thought, well, I could put the same energy into my own business. And at this time, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. The money is coming in. It felt good. A sense of accomplishment, taking properties that were tired and bringing them back to life.
And what period was this?
Mostly the 90s, and then maybe early 2000s, and then we got really serious. We hired a property management company to manage our properties because I didn't have really a lot of time to do that. I started turning more and more houses, and I was doing maybe 20 to 30 houses a year with my wife, and we had some people working for us that were helping us do that as well. And then I teamed up with a couple other guys, and we started a company where we'd buy houses in bulk from the bank. So we were buying 20 to 30 houses at a time from a bank in bulk, and we would do about up to a couple hundred a year.
Wow.
It was all over West Michigan. It went great. Things were going great, going along. Life was good.
Right. So let's stay there for a moment.
Yeah.
Life is good.
Yeah.
You're buying in bulk. What kind of, talk about the numbers. When you're buying bulk from a bank, and by the way, this is what, early 2000s?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you're buying in bulk from a bank, how much money do you need to come in with? Because are you getting financing from the bank?
Yeah, we were getting financing from the bank. I mean, I had built up enough money where I could have that set aside for the most part and just leverage the money from the bank. We were buying 50 cents on the dollar, sometimes less. We had instant equity, so we thought, and we did for a while. We weren't getting greedy with this. What we wanted to do is we wanted to buy these homes. If they needed fixed up, we would go in and do the basic cleanups, the turns. We would still try to sell them under market value. We would make money, but someone would still get a good deal.
Right.
And that's what we were really trying to do.
And it was a great time to be doing that.
It was a great time. We just said we wanted to do volume and not get greedy.
Let's talk about just some of the numbers here.
Mm-hmm.
A typical package that you would buy from the bank, what would you end up paying, and how would you structure the financing of that?
Well, I had a line of credit. It was like printing money in your basement almost. I mean, the banks were very loose, very cooperative. We would talk to them and we'd say, we'll take this package of 25 properties, and they could range anywhere from $30,000 to $130,000
per property, and you're buying 30 at a time.
Yeah,
so you're in millions of dollars.
Yeah, probably. Between $500,000 to $1.5 million at any given time, you kind of had out there. And then it started to grow because then there would be overlap, and then you'd have some that you were selling off, and at the same time you're buying more. And we just sort of kept negotiating. And again, I had a couple of other partners. They had really quite a bit of experience in putting these packages together. That was what intrigued me, because I'm thinking I can do 10, 15 a year, or I can do 150 a year, and we can maybe make more money. And we did. So then we started to invest in income properties with some of the proceeds, but then things started to change. One thing that I was kind of noticing along the way is that I felt like some of the management of our properties were just not being run like how I would like to see them run.
So you had a third-party management
We
company.
did.
You weren't doing any of the managing at that point?
Not at that point, no. We started to do a little bit of it, but even then, we would manage the traditional way as well. And it just didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me.
And these were this was on the rental income properties
that we had.
Not the flips you were doing.
Not the flips.
Those you were rehabbing and flipping.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And then 06, 07, we tried to invest in Florida, and we bought quite a bit of property down there, but the due diligence ran out. We had someone working on it, wasn't paying attention to the timing of it, and we lost about $500,000 on that deal.
Ooh. That
timing couldn't have been worse, because what was happening at the same time was the market was changing.
And you were probably already seeing those cracks in Florida at that time.
Yes. When that happened, it was probably 3 or 4 weeks later, I get my first call from a bank, and we had done business 4 years together, saying that we are unable to renew your loans this time around. I'm shocked, because that's how our business would run on working capital from the banks. They just said, we're unable to renew the loans, and you need to try and just go to another bank, and this time around, we're not going to be allowed to do it.
Was this before the Lehman Brothers and the stock market started to
about the same time it started to happen? 06 and 07, we started to hear this. When that happened, of course, I called some other banks that we were doing business with. I think we were doing business with about 9 different banks. They all started saying the same thing. We had several properties. I can't remember the exact number, but maybe 50, 60 that we're sitting on would maybe have 60% loan to value on a property, started to become 70%, 80%, 90%, 100%.
Because the values of
because the values were going down. Declining. Yeah, and we were trying to do some projects at the same time. There was no working capital left. Investors were getting prepared. I think they saw the handwriting on the wall as well. They were going to lose their investments. Some investors understood, and they got it. They didn't get it, but they were accepting of it. And some investors, I'm pretty sure, hated my guts, and it was my fault that this world was crashing around us. And I felt like it was, because at the time when you're in it, you don't know that this is truly happening to everybody else out there, maybe at the same time. You just are worried about your own world.
Right. It feels like it's all directed toward you.
Right. I had 2 other partners. Together, we tried to just salvage this and bring it together, but we were unable to. So we crashed in 2008, and we all had to file bankruptcy. And when that happened, great things happened after the pain.
So you were flying high, and you crashed and burned, along with a lot of other people in 2008.
Yeah.
And I want to get to what happened after that, because that has brought you to where you are today.
Yeah.
But I want to take a moment, because at that time there was a mentality, not just, I'm sure you weren't just thinking, it wasn't just you thinking this, but it was a lot of people thinking this, values are going to keep going up, the good times are going to keep rolling.
Right.
What were some of the signs along the way that made you maybe should have paid a little bit more attention to? And I also want to kind of look at the parallels between then and today. when there's also a lot of people who are feeling like the good times are going to keep rolling.
Right. The big lesson that I learned was I would always make decisions based on history. And historically, real estate would always go up in value consistently, just up, 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 up. One of the signs that I pay attention to more now, well, I'm very conservative now in my investments. I'm probably too conservative sometimes, but the lending of banks, how free they were to make deals happen. They believed the same thing we believed, and were pushing it and making sure these deals would happen no matter what. And how we all went through it, in hindsight, I think that everybody could have done a better job, because what happened was, all of a sudden your notes are being called. You can't perform on them because the leverage in those notes that we use was to generate our income in order to pay on them. So, so the only thing left was the investor money that might have had some equity in some of these properties, and then that was shrinking quickly. So they lost their investments. But then what surprised me was, instead of working with some of these people that had experience in this industry, they were just shutting them off and letting them file bankruptcy and go under. And a new group of people would come in and buy these properties, pennies on the dollar, with no experience. There was a little bit of a wave after all that happened where they didn't make it either. And it surprised me a little bit that the bankers wouldn't just say, okay, we're going through this together. How can we... And there were a couple of bankers that actually tried to do this, but I felt like their hands were tied and they couldn't. But how do we make this work together? Because you definitely have the experience. The economy is crashing right now. It's out of all of our control. But who would you rather work with? People who have years of experience, or new people coming in just because they have the cash to bail it out.
Yeah, buying pennies on the dollar. You were buying for 50 cents on the dollar. They were buying for pennies on the dollar.
Right.
But if the banks aren't lending, then who's going to buy? After they rehab a property, who's going to buy it?
Right.
Because they can't get a loan.
And that's what happened. They ended up setting on so many properties, and they were not in the real estate business, yet they tried to be. So it was just an incredibly ugly time. So the lesson I learned was not to, just because the bank's willing to lend the money doesn't mean it's a good thing to take. And then the other thing today, looking back, after going through the worst, real estate crash ever, it recouped. It did come back. If you had the patient money and you had the deep pockets, it did come back, and it's strong again. But I don't feel like it's as artificial this time. My belief is that there'll be a little bit of a pop, maybe in a couple of years or 2 or 3 years. And it may not be a pop, it might be more of a leveling out. I think the difference is this time around, not to panic, but know that it'll come back, and there's hope.
Maybe the banks have learned the lesson from the mistakes they made the last time, and they don't overreact by
and that's exactly what happened.
Notes that might still be performing.
Right, and I think that is. I hope that's the lesson they've learned, and I think everyone learned a lesson through this. All it took me quite a while, even though it was, it's true, but it took me a while to believe that really this whole thing wasn't all my fault. That the economy crashed, and but when you hear it from people that you respect and care about, then it's just like, wow, you really. How do you ever get out of this?
So you're back to ground zero.
I'm back to ground zero. Worse than back to ground zero. Yeah. Back to ground zero without being able to leverage again for a long time.
What did you do?
So how did you I remember sitting in my office breaking down. It was the worst day of my life, I felt at the time. You have bad days until you have a day like that where there's no turning back at this point. My wife, Ruth, and I, we did a lot of praying about this, and it was kind of neat because I was driving home after sitting in my office, just not knowing what to do, where to turn. And I get a call from a very good friend of mine who owned a complex in town, and he said, Marty, you and Ruth have been kind of heavy on my heart with everything that's going on in the economy right now. Would you by any chance have any interest in managing one of my properties? I thought, wow, maybe this could be an opportunity for us just to stay afloat. And at the time, he didn't know kind of where we were heading. So I said, I'd like to meet and talk about it, but I don't want to say yes or no right now, because I had a lot of issues with property management companies and how they operate. There's a lot of wonderful property management companies out there, but my idea of trying to start a management company and or manage for this gentleman, I just couldn't do it the way I had seen it done out there. He showed me what he had been paying his own staff to man this property. And we looked at the numbers and I said, well, I know we can do it for this. I think we'll have interest. However, I'd kind of like to try a different concept. I don't know if it'll work, but if it does, it'll be a better product for you. And I think we would have a management company with integrity that puts us both on the same side. He was a good enough friend where he said, let's try it. Let's see what we can do. If something doesn't work, I'm not going to leave you hanging. And we decided to take the challenge.
So what does that mean then in concept and reality, doing it a different way? Because you had a different model in mind.
I did.
You wanted to try.
And in the beginning, I was saying words and I wasn't sure what it looked like right out the gate, because I just knew it didn't feel right when property management companies were making money off of my problems. I knew that there were always going to be problems. I knew that you do make money when you're working on fixing those problems. But how can you get the same mindset of not being excited when those problems happen? As an owner, you're not happy when you have problems. As a property management company, it's an inconvenience when you have problems, but you're making money at least when there's problems. For instance, if there is a repair on the property, an owner isn't happy about that. A property management company is going to profit from it. So consciously or subconsciously, it puts you on different sides with your mindset. And I wanted to come up with a way to put us on the same side. Again, I wasn't sure how to do that. I knew that if I put tenants in and they were okay and they moved out, I'd get paid again if I did it the traditional way. So what motivates me to put good tenants in there? I knew that if we put a patch on a repair, I'd get to fix it again in 6 months and I could make more money. And not that I would ever want to do that, but I saw it done. On our properties, I saw it done over and over again.
That was your experience.
That was my experience,
companies
right? And I'm not sure, and I'm not saying that management companies do that always on purpose or not. I know enough people in the industry, even in the management higher level of property management companies, they may not think that's happening, but I've talked to enough maintenance technicians, and some of them do that quality of work because that's job security for them. It may not trickle up for them to know that's happening, but it does happen. I know leasing agents that their livelihood is to fill apartments. Well, if you put tenants in there that are going to stay there for 2 or 3 years, or they're not making money every year. There's just some ways that traditional property management companies have been set up that I didn't like. I didn't like the idea that I was holding on to the owner's money for 30 to 45 days in my bank account. And it doesn't seem like a big deal if it's if you're only managing 50 units, but it becomes a big deal if you're managing 1,000 units.
So how did you go about changing all that? You knew what you didn't like,
right,
and what you didn't want to do. How did you go about changing it so that it became something that worked in both the management company and the owner's benefit?
Right. Well, we knew what the history was of expenses on this property. We knew we could stay within those parameters. So the goal was, how do we do a better job for less? We took this property and we looked at it and we said, okay, what if we were to charge so much per door per month? And some apartments will have no problems. Some will have a lot of problems. But if we charge one amount, the probability of certain things happening are XYZ, we can come up with a formula. So we came up with a formula that said, we will keep your place at market rate and at an occupancy rate that is what's happening in our current market. we'll go head to head with anybody out there. So we'll keep it full, we'll keep it maintained, and we will do this for this fee. The idea is that you've got our men and women out there fixing things, and if they do a great job, it costs me less money because I continue to get this fee. So we set up parameters. The first hour, a lot of maintenance calls are an hour or less. So we say,
So starting with maintenance.
Maintenance, an hour or less is part of our fee. If it goes over an hour, or if it's something that has to have super skilled labor, we would invoice for that. But for normal maintenance, it's part of our fee. Now I'm motivated to make sure our maintenance technicians are doing it right the first time, because if they have to go back and fix it again, it's costing me money. I'm on the same side of the owner there, because the owner wants it fixed right the first time as well. And now so do I. The second area would be the leasing. And the leasing would be getting market rates, having them at an occupancy that is standard or what's happening in our market at the time. Some people may say, well, if you're not paying your people on commission, what's going to motivate them to lease the apartment? My answer is they're on salary, and that's their job. And then if you look at our numbers, and this is all proven out with reports, if you look at our numbers, we're at or higher than anybody else in the market who have those people that they're paying on commission. A person could say, well, how do I know you're keeping the property in decent shape? We'll do physical condition reports so that we can take a look and say, this is what's happening on the properties. We document, we're totally transparent on everything we do, so that people can see what we're doing, and they'll also be able to see if there's a pattern if we ever have to go back and do something again and again. Because if that's happening, that's costing me money, not the owner, because it's all in the fee. The other piece was holding on to the money. I didn't want to hold on to the rents for 30 to 45 days. I know there's money to be made there, and we decided not to go that route. Let's just put it directly into the bank accounts of the owner, and it's their money. We still do all the accounting and bookkeeping that's needed along the way, but it's from that account. It's from their account. A person can take a look at that and say, well, okay, how do you know if you're on the right track? Well, now we do variance reports. So our variance reports will tell us how were we doing this year compared to last year, this month compared to last month, where are our expenses, how are we doing, why is it that the water bill is up this month, what's going on. We make decisions off of that. So we'll come in and we take a look and we'll say, okay, why is this happening? Well, the sprinkler was turned on this month, or there was a plumbing leak and this is what happened. And, it should be explainable. We drive a lot of our decisions off reports. Those reports help our people become more and more efficient in what they do and their decision making. We also cross-train. We cross-train our property managers to be able to handle every property that we have so that they understand it. Same with our maintenance technicians. They are our staff. They're on our staff. We only sub out when maybe there's overflow work or skilled labor that maybe we may not have the ability to do. That was the other piece that I struggled with when I hired property management companies in the past. Was I would see a lot of subcontractors doing work on my property. There was a markup fee for them to manage that for me.
Right. So you might see a typical 10 to 15% markup
right.
on the management side to hire someone to come in and do some repairs or improvements.
And I certainly can understand, again, that's how they make their money. We take a different approach. We'll get bids on projects. Let's say someone may come in and bid $1,000. A management company might rebill it out at $1,150 or something and put $150 in their pocket. We'll bid it out as a company. We may work with a subcontractor on some projects, but if we can do some of the work and not all the work, we might be able to do it for $800. So there's a big flip, spread in the difference when you take the time to figure it out. So our company still ends up making money because we're able to do maybe some or all the work. We bid it out. But the only way we like to do it that way is if we can save the owner money. And the owner can make the decision whether they want to use us or not.
If there's a project that goes above and beyond the definition of routine maintenance that's included in the flat fee, Green Property Management will also put in a bid on that work.
Yes, yeah.
But you'll get bids from other companies as well.
Right.
You're not adding on that 10%
No.
surcharge to subcontract that work.
No. And that's where it gets tricky. It's hard to get people sometimes to bid after a while on projects because we typically will come in much less. And a lot of times these people say, I don't even want to show up and bid because we're not going to get it. So that's when we started to come up with this idea, what if we work together? What if you get some of it and we get some of it, keeps our costs down, you make money, we make money. So that's been helpful in the past. And we do enough volume now where, we know who to turn to and talk to make those kind of deals happen. And go back a little bit and let's talk about some of probably the mistakes we've made in starting this up with the management company. One of the things that we found is that with our approach, we really need to be in contracts for 2 or 3 years for us to start to benefit in a really great way.
And why is that?
Because we're putting a lot of investment in time into getting the property running like a machine so that our people we don't have to have as many people on staff to take care of a certain property, because once it's running well, it takes less effort. And now we're starting to make more of a profit as a company. For instance, we may have one manager for 250 units and 1.5 maintenance technicians for the same amount. Initially, there's a lot more work up front to get it to that point, but once it's running like a machine, you can maintain it at that level for quite a while. We had one property we did a lot of work on, got it beautiful. It was great. A year and a half later, the owner sold it and made a ton of money, which was great for them. And I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking, well, we're doing our job. But then now we're like, wow, when we do a contract, we really need to have at least a 3-year contract, or it's going to be, especially on harder properties, it's tough to make money.
So you have to be somewhat choosy as to what properties or even owners you work with, because you're going to be putting so much of your resources into a property once you take over, that you need to make sure you're locked in for a period of at least 3 years so that you can make a profit. Yeah,
and what we have found, it's not so much the property type anymore. We weren't sure if it was going to work on smaller units, our model. We weren't sure if it was going to work on the more difficult types of units that are out there, the apartment complexes that are out there. The D, right. Mm-hmm. And yet it does. And we have, we'll be going into our 9th year now. It works, and so we've proven it out. We have case studies now. We can show how it has worked successfully.
So let me sum up here, because I want to make sure that our listeners understand what the difference is here. A traditional management company is going to charge, say, 10% of your gross rents. They're also going to charge when they lease a unit. They're going to charge you half to a full month's rent once they put a new tenant in place. And there'll probably be a releasing fee if 12 months later that same tenant re-signs a lease. When there's a maintenance need, that management company is going to charge you separate for maintenance. If they need to subcontract that out, quite often you'll see a 10% surcharge on that. Yeah. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the traditional management model is. But you've kind of turned that on its head with a flat fee model.
Yeah.
So just to kind of go over and put everything you just said together, your flat fee model is based on a certain amount per door, and that amount includes the management and the leasing. So you're paying a flat fee every month, whether the unit is occupied or not, but it includes the leasing, so that when a new tenant is put in, that's all included in the flat fee. When that tenant re-signs their lease, that's included in the flat fee. When it comes to maintenance, the flat fee also includes the first hour of maintenance. And typically, and I think we've talked about this off mic, most maintenance calls, probably 80% at least of maintenance calls, take under an hour to complete. So a huge chunk of your maintenance expense is covered in that flat fee.
Right.
It doesn't include supplies.
No.
You're going to bill supplies back to the owner, but it does include the maintenance. And if you go over that hour, then there's an hourly rate that you begin to charge.
Yeah, and often in our contracts, we can bill for skilled labor if necessary. But because of the ability and the training that our maintenance technicians have, we do throw a lot of skilled labor into that first hour if necessary.
Yeah, and you do have skilled maintenance technicians on staff who can probably tackle 90% of the things that happen at any given property. Another component of your flat fee is the flex staff. And the staffing. I mean, if you have, you're managing all of my properties at this point, both large communities and the smaller communities. The larger communities that typically require staff, people on site, a leasing agent, manager, maintenance tech. Right. Typically, you would see on the ownership side the cost of payroll and employee expenses, but that is all included in your flat fee as well.
Correct.
And then also just the management of the money and the finances. Quite often, a management company will withhold your funds 30 to 40 days until they've paid the bills and made sure that there's enough money in the account to then transfer some of that to you. But your owners are sharing. I mean, basically, you have access over the account.
It's in real time.
It's a real-time account. So, and you also use AppFolio. You didn't mention this, but AppFolio is your accounting software or system in the cloud, and you can go. Any owner can go real time and look at AppFolio to see the money that's coming in, the money that's going out.
Yeah, we use AppFolio, and then we've also developed some software that we use internally with it that works with our model. There's plenty of software and material out there for traditional property management company. Because ours is unique, we've had to create some software that we use with AppFolio and internally that is very advanced.
So you have some proprietary software that you're using as well.
And some of the other benefits of our company is, we have 3 attorneys on staff now. We can answer a lot of the questions that a person might have to pay for professional help on. It comes in handy when we're putting deals together with clients. That's a huge piece. You mentioned this earlier, but it's super important on who we do business with. Our clients are more important than the kind of properties that we manage. We can manage any type of property if the owners are in agreement and understand what the goal is and how we get there. I've often said when we take over a property, the income will go down, expenses will go up. Do you still want to hire us? And, people will say, of course not. And I'll say, well, but let me tell you what happens after we go through that exercise.
No one wants to hear from a potential management company, well, your expenses are going to go up and your profit's going to go down. But that's what you say because
initially, if your property is struggling, there's usually movement that has to take place. We may need to put lighting and cameras and we may need to get rid of some people that are in there that are making a community not a healthy community. Your expenses will go up. Your income's going to go down because you're going to lose that revenue. Even if they were paying a little bit, you'll lose that in order for us to put new, fresh people in. The other piece of our company that's different is that we try to create new behavior in our tenants as well. First, we had to change the mentality of owners that were so used to using traditional property management. So once we were able to do that, our next step was how do we change the behavior of tenants in how they perceive property management companies. And I know that there's maybe hundreds of property management company owners, mom and pop owners out there listening to this. You feel like you're a counselor for a lot of tenants a lot of times. So we have tried to put systems in place to stop that. A lot of times people are on site for what reason? I always ask myself, why do we have people on site? As we go forward, we're going to slowly start having less and less people on site And again, but that's only if you create the right behavior in the tenant so that you can do that.
Yeah. So in other words, you're going to run a property more like a business and less like a social service.
Exactly. Doesn't mean we can't still have events. It doesn't mean we can't still do things socially for the tenants, but that'll be exactly what it is. It's not to have an office on site to allow the same 6, 7, 8 people come in every day or every week just to talk about whatever's on their mind. That is not cost efficient for anybody. But yet, some communities feel that they need that. Well, they need it because that's what tenants have expected. You have to sort of look at the personality of the community and see what's needed at the time, and then it's a slow, gradual behavior change in the tenants. And our communities have become very receptive to that. Our on-site offices, the hours are shrinking there. They still work 40 hours a week, but they're able to work harder and better and more efficient on more properties instead of sitting in an office just waiting for someone to come in to chat with them.
So for an owner, it's somewhat of a shock to the system because chances are, in most cases, an owner would be coming to you because they may not be happy with the results they're getting from their current property management.
Right.
Or they're buying a new property that has some upside and they want a management team that can come in and kind of change things, create new behaviors in the residents there. I think the question that probably a lot of listeners are thinking right now is, well, what is this flat fee? How much does it cost? And how do you determine what that's going to be?
Well, that's a great question. In this market in the West Michigan area, depending on the property and the personality of the property, it could be anywhere from $100 to $135 per unit per month. It really depends. We do have a couple of properties. We have some commercial properties that we will do service only. And it's just a contract that we're available 24/7 for them to call us to handle anything that comes up, and that's negotiated separately.
I guess the next question then would be: is that flat fee all you're charging? I mean, are there additional hidden costs somewhere in there?
No, the only, nothing that's hidden. CapEx type expenses, those are extra. We're talking normal maintenance, painting. That was one thing that we did do as part of it at the beginning, and we've decided not to do that going forward. It was better for everybody to actually lower our rate or keep it and not raise it, and then start to phase that out. The other thing is that if we do have to go after certain costs, we aggressively go after the tenant for it now. Whereas a lot of owners always been part of their expense. Well, you know that there's going to be this normal wear and tear, and certainly there is, but we have found that if we can recoup a lot of the expenses from the tenant, it helps the owner on their bottom line over several hundred units. If they have that many, it adds up.
Well, what about fees like late fees, pet fees, non-refundable pet deposits? These are things that other management companies sometimes keep for themselves.
Yeah, we do not keep them. All that is revenue for the owner. There are some things that, for instance, if we are going to charge to clean an apartment, we collect cleaning fees. Now, the cleaning fee will go to the owner to offset that cost. Where in the past, and even now, I know some property management companies will collect the cleaning fee, they keep it, and yet they'll still go and clean the apartment and bill the owner, because that's been a line item for that owner for as long as they've owned that property. Pet fees, same thing, that gets thrown through.
Thrown through to the owner.
To the owner, yeah. We want to be fair. You know, we're in it to make money. We don't want to be out of business, but when we're making it, and we're doing it because we're working hard, doing things right, keeping ourselves on the same side as the owner, wanting the property to be healthy. We always look for ways to improve properties, to save the owner money. We'll make suggestions, whether it's LED lighting or different water systems or tightening it up with insulation and fixing windows. We try to find ways where if the return on the investment is there, we'll lay it out and we'll say, over the next year and a half, maybe it's a bigger investment, but in 3 years it'll be a payback. And we sit down and together we're a team. And that's why it's so important for us to have the right clients. We have, I know other property management companies, they might have 150 clients and maybe they manage, 500 or 600 units. We manage over 1,000 and we have less than 10.
Less than 10 clients altogether.
Yeah. We give personal attention. We make ourselves available. We work hard on taking kind of ownership of these properties as well, and so that we can get the best result for not only the owner, but for us as a company. The better job we do, the more we'll make. So that's our goal.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can say from my experience, you're managing everything from smaller duplexes all the way up to a large 207 unit apartment community. And each property kind of works a little different within your system. But it works well as far as everything you're saying. I mean, I can vouch for everything you just said. What is the sweet spot for the type of property that you manage? If you have a toehold in an area, which you do now in Grand Rapids, Wyoming,
Holland,
Muskegon, Holland. Yeah. Then if someone has a 2-unit in those areas, then you're more interested in managing.
Absolutely.
But if they're down in, say, Kalamazoo, where I don't think you have a presence at this point,
we're looking.
You're not interested
right.
in managing
we
down there.
Do feel like we want to move into Kalamazoo. I think we will be within the next year. Based on some of the phone calls and people that have been contacting me. Many people think that they can just call us and we'll take them on. I turn business down every week for one reason or another. Either it's just not a good fit, they don't quite understand our model, and that's okay. I think within the next year, we should have a presence in Kalamazoo. The other thing is that we're interested in actually taking our model nationally now. There are a lot of mom and pop property management companies that may have interest in trying this concept or using this concept. We are going to be launching sort of a campaign to allow those people to come to us and we can work together and partner with them on building this kind of a model.
So if you're a mom and pop shop, say in Nebraska,
right,
or Oklahoma City, let's say,
sure, yep,
and you have over 100 units, they could get in touch with you and create a partnership that would bring your model to Oklahoma City.
Yes. The higher the rents are in a community, the better our model works for the owner. If you're in California and you're paying $3,000 a month for rent, for a 1-bedroom, the property management's getting a percentage of that. It's a lot more money. The economy of scale, it doesn't cost us any more whether the rents are $3,000 a month or $800 a month. If the rents are only $500 a month somewhere, all of a sudden it's harder for our model to work. There has to be a threshold somewhere, but the more expensive units you have, the more you're charging for rent, the better our model is for those owners because a lot of those people are paying on a percentage basis.
And then just to be clear, if you're in the West Michigan area, say Grand Rapids,
yes,
and you have a single family or a duplex or a smaller portfolio, you're able to take that on
Absolutely.
With your formula because you already are here.
We're already here. We're already established. We're already doing it. For the first few years, we didn't take any of those on. We weren't sure if our model would work. And frankly, it wouldn't have worked without a lot of the other apartment complexes around because we wouldn't have even tried it. But we had someone come to us who had a portfolio around one of our apartment complexes, and we said, let's try it. And it worked. It worked fantastically. It was great. And then we said, we were able to strip it back and say, would have it still worked if we wouldn't have had this complex here? And the answer was yes, but the 100 units that was right there helped us take that step to try to do it. But if we were to leave and go into a different community, we would want at least 100 units because we have our service trucks. We have a whole system on how we work together and communicate. Think of the Orkin man out there. That we've got our trucks out there ready to go, ready to serve. All our maintenance technicians are working off of routes that they know they need to hit, and when things come up, they're on it. Again, everything's in real time for them as well.
And Marty, I know we're gonna be wrapping this up here. I do want to say thank you for being our first sponsor.
Oh, you're welcome.
Because starting in July of 2017, Green Property Management will be a sponsor of the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor podcast. Thank you for agreeing to do that.
Yeah.
I'm excited to have you on board.
It's a privilege. Yeah, we're looking forward to sponsoring you, and we've certainly have learned to work really well together. Brian has brought a lot of good ideas to our company as well, and most of the time we use them.
And then sometimes you just nod and smile.
I do. Yeah.
So Marty, why don't you take us out on a story here?
Oh, well,
I want to hear a good juicy war story.
A good juicy war story. Well, I can tell you that when I first was getting back into the income property business, I was working full time, and I had bought up a couple of blocks of property. There were a couple of 14 units, an 11 unit, and a single family home and a commercial building. It was a very, very rough part of town. I was trying to think of how to turn this place around. So I did start to light it up a little bit, and I didn't have the camera ability at that time. And so the lights would keep getting busted out, and there was a lot of drugs, prostitution, just a lot of stuff going on. But I thought, well, maybe if I just go down there and hang out a little bit, I can see what's really happening. I would sit down there in a parking lot and just sort of watch what was happening. And one night, it was about 2 a.m. Sure enough, here comes somebody and through the parking lot, and I noticed that they're walking past the building. He set something next to kind of some garbage cans. The way he placed it, I knew he wasn't just throwing trash. It was something setting there probably for someone else to pick up. I went around and met the person as this was happening. There were some words exchanged, and he actually picked up a branch and just hit me really hard in the head. Always it was in the head. I don't know how I always got hit in the head, but it was always in the head. But I did have my handy billy club with me at the time, and as I kind of went down, I swung as hard as I could at his kneecap, and he was in great pain after that. He crawled under a light and sat there. At the time, I had one of those backpack type cell phones in your car, the old-fashioned kind that was about the size of a backpack, it seemed like. And I called the police. They came, and they actually arrested the guy, but I thought I might have some issues again because of what I had done. About a week later, I get a call from the Vice, and they said, "Can we talk to you?" And I'm thinking, uh-oh, here it comes. I said, "Sure." And they said, "Well, we saw kind of how this all played out, and we kind of have an idea what happened. We're wondering if you'd be willing to help us out because we feel like there's someone in your property that is doing some illegal activity." And I'm like, well, that's like no surprise. like which unit, they all were, it seemed like. So I said, well, what do you have in mind? And they said, well, one particular unit, we feel like they're selling stolen merchandise out of the unit. It's a pretty good sized ring, and there's a woman in there that would like to sort of get her record cleaned up a little bit and is willing to cooperate, but we would like to see if you would want to be involved in this. And I said, well, what does that look like? You'd come by and pick her up. And I said, well, why would I be picking her up? What are these people going to think? Oh, that's no problem. She'll just tell them you're having an affair with her. I said, well, that's not going to happen. I said, we need to be talking to my wife about this. So they came over to our home, sat down with my wife and I, and they said, listen, you guys have done a great job of trying to clean this place up. You don't have to do this, but this is the plan. And we looked at each other and we said, we've worked really hard. Let's just go for it. We had to do 3 drug buys to become a reliable source. This is the craziest thing. I went and picked this girl up. We went to different places that she knew. I had no idea where to go, but I was the driver. The police had given her the money to buy drugs. So she'd go in and we'd go in and buy drugs and come back out. We'd meet the police out in a parking lot, a place that they had told us to meet them, and we'd give them the drugs back. The very first stop, I just can't even believe this is happening. She gets the drugs, she's got them there, and she starts taking some of it. And I'm thinking, oh, this is not good, And so I've given the police what's left of the drugs, and I handed it to them, and I said, here it is. I'm not sure it's all there. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not quite all there, but I just want you to know it wasn't me. And they said, we understand, don't worry about it. So we did our 3 drug buys. And then they gave us a PIN number so that when something would happen at our property, we could call and give this number as a reliable source, and they would come immediately with no questions asked. I mean, it would just happen. About a week later, maybe 2 weeks, it happened where there was some really strong activity going on in one of our units, and the police showed up. There were like several arrests. I mean, over 10, I believe. But then it started to get complicated because there were guns involved. Some of it, these people were from Chicago. So it got turned over, I think, to the FBI. But it was a big deal. And we cleaned out that place. And once those people were gone, I wasn't a very large operation or anything. I'm thinking, oh, great, there goes the income. They were great payers. They paid cash. It was great. All was good. But then the place started to really turn around. And we ended up getting some nurses and doctors and real young professional people into our buildings. But it took a couple of years to get it to that point.
Took you having to become a reliable source.
For me to become a reliable source,
local police.
Yeah. And I promise I did not take any of those drugs. But as I've gotten older, other people can do that now.
You have people who work for
that's
you.
Right, yeah. That's right.
Go on the drug buys.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So that's kind of a fun story.
The properties you manage now are not this bad.
No, we have taken on some that have been, but only when we take them on, it's the understanding that we're going to change them, take them from being something like that with a plan. And we sit down with the owner and we're brutally honest with them on what it's going to take. And then we execute it. It takes time. It can take a year or 2 or 3 even to make it happen, but it's worth it if you play it out. So again, this is part of the reason it's important for us to work with the right clients. We're not a short-term company. We don't want to be in your life today and gone tomorrow. We want to be in your life if you want to grow a portfolio, maybe even you have a portfolio that's difficult and you've tried this and you've tried that and you say, well, this area is never going to be any better. There's always strategies that can work to help. At the very least, we'd love to sit down and talk to you about that.
So if someone wants to get a hold of you, Marty,
yeah,
or Green Property Management, what's the best way to do that?
The best way would be to just call our 800 number, and there's extensions, and if they wanted, they can pick my extension.
Do you know the 800 number?
It's 1-800-95-GREEN.
1-800-95-GREEN.
Yeah.
And your website is greenpropertymgt.com?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So green, Green, property, MGT.com.
And my email is martin@greenpropertymgt.com.
All right. Fantastic. Well, Marty, thanks so much for taking the time to sit down and share these stories with us. There's a lot of compelling reasons why your flat fee model seems to be working. I mean, I can certainly attest to that. And I'm thrilled to have you as our first sponsor for this podcast. I think as people listen to future episodes, they'll hear me mentioning your company. Mm-hmm. Thanks for helping bring that kind of energy to the podcast.
And one last thing quick on the flat fee. There are a lot of companies out there that claim to do the flat fee. And the only thing I would suggest is to really look into what that means. Just be careful.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Brian.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.